Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Oklahoma City Thunder exacted revenge in Game 2 of the NBA Finals. Also, after being dominated, has the magic run out for the Pacers, and the Edmonton Oilers are ready to bounce back.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
The Oklahoma City Thunder were too much for the Pacers in Game 2 of the NBA Finals. Locked On Thunder host Rylan Stiles recapped OKC's victory.
And I thought there was a couple of quotes from postgame that really explain what has been an embodiment from this Thunder team, what has been their bread and butter this entire season. Chet Holmgren and SGA talking about what it feels like when you're playing Indiana and you get up by 15, 20, and you know that another Indiana run is coming. Chet Holmgren said, you can't play like you're up. You've just got to try. You can't try to just run the clock out. You have to continue to score and continue to stack stops on the other end. And SGA said, you can't just land the first punch. You've got to keep landing punches all game long. And he obviously gave the team some grace of you can't play a perfect game, but it's about landing as many punches as possible, not just the first one. And so often we think about that first one and how it sets the table for the 48 minutes, but this Indiana team truly does play all 48 minutes. And this Thunder team responded in a game in which they grew their biggest lead in that second quarter, getting up by 23 points. Right after that, you saw the Pacers going a 10-0 run. So it was a 35-9 Thunder run. That they were playing fast, they were making quick decisions, they were stacking stops, and it led them to a 23-point lead. Indiana calls a timeout, and Indiana immediately goes on a 10-0 run to put the Thunder lead to 18 at the half, which, the fact that the deficit only got cut from 23 to 18 is a big win for the Thunder at the end of that second quarter, considering how sloppy things got for them heading into intermission. And then the Thunder were able to parlay that into a second half where they continued to keep the foot on the gas, and they had to navigate through some adjustments of the whistle. The officials tonight, I thought, were consistent in each half. It was just a different consistency. The first half, they were consistent in letting everyone, it's just no holds bars. It's a bar fight in the first half. Second half, you couldn't look at somebody funny without getting a call on either side. And so each team had to adjust in real time to the different whistle. The Thunder did that. The Thunder were able to maintain their lead and were able to keep the Pacers at arm distance for 48 minutes instead of the 40 minutes from Game 1. And that understanding of, hey, it can be at the 5-minute mark and you can be fending off the Pacers all game long. If you start to play, like Chet is saying, like you're in the lead and you start to kind of go on cruise control, try to run the clock out, they're going to beat you. And to learn that lesson after one game has been what this young Thunder team has done all year long. It's funny how the conversation has shifted around Oklahoma City, because on every single squad show that we've ever done on this network during the regular season, you get beat over the head with Matt Moore and others saying that this team's too young to do anything. And then they get to this stage and they lose in Game 1 and it's the biggest failure of all time. And they've continuously found ways to improve and learn from those mistakes. That's what's gotten them here. They had to grow up in that Denver series. They had to learn in that Minnesota series how to play with a series lead. And against Indiana, they had to learn how to play against the Pacers and how to play for 48 minutes and finish a game all the way through. Because the reality is, as Mark points out, that the Pacers are an acquired taste. The reality is that the Nuggets and the Timberwolves, they didn't make the Thunder run through the ticker tape. Right? They didn't make the Thunder finish. They gave up. They rolled over. In the blowout games of those two series, both teams were willing to wave the white flag. That's not in this Pacers team, even as they have a 1-0 series lead and have done their job, just like that Denver team had did their job in Game 1 of that series. Like the Pacers didn't quit until it was mathematically impossible for them to win. And the same can't be said for other squads, right? So they had to learn how to play a 48-minute game as a very young team, and they did that. And they did that mainly by playing quicker, making better decisions, by being better in transitional opportunities, right? It doesn't translate into into numbers because they actually lost fast break points. They actually weren't too much better in points off turnovers tonight comparatively to game one because they only forced 15 turnovers for Indiana. The Thunder had about 14 points off of those turnovers, so that they weren't even that much better in that area. But the process was better. The process was extraordinarily better in the half court. The Thunder ran much better offense in this game. They had higher screens. They actually set more screens because typically the Thunder like to slip screens and just kind of ghost them. And that doesn't initiate the contact, thus initiate switches and initiate kind of miscommunication from the Pacers defense. They did that tonight at a much higher clip, and especially Isaiah Hartenstein went a long way in helping the Thunder create advantages with his screening. They had more ball movement. They had quicker ball movement, and they started the actions earlier in the shot clock and found multiple different opportunities in one possession to eventually break down this Pacers defense and eventually get points. And a large part of that was because of the MVP, was because of SGA. But you also saw Chet Holmgren bounce back in a big way.
You can stay up to date all year on the Oklahoma City Thunder by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Thunder on YouTube or on your favorite podcast app. You're Locked On Sports Today. Coming up, the Pacers regroup as the series heads to Indiana. Before we get to that, college sports are about to change forever. Ever check your bank account and wonder where'd all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. First time ever, schools can now pay college athletes directly and not just with scholarships or vague NIL opportunities. We're talking real paychecks starting July 1st. The NCAA settlement is a $2.8 billion swing towards a new era, one where athletes are finally treated more like professionals and unpaid mascots. College football has been a mess for years. Now it's just a union away from becoming the minor leagues with marching bands. Over on the diamond, the Red Sox took down the Yankees.
Hey, I want to give you the at-bat of the night, because this is the bullpen. We're going to wrap up here shortly. But the at-bat of the night for me, yes, you hit the 5 home runs. Campbell ties the game. Narvaez puts them in front. They never trailed again. But my at-bat of the game, which I like to try to get in here in the second segment, sometimes I get absent-minded. But my at-bat, and I'm actually going to say at-bats of the game, Greg Weissert, 8th inning. Zach Kelly couldn't get through the 8th inning clean. Weissert entered, 2 runners on. He strikes out Jazz Chisholm. Then he gets LeMahieu on a fly ball. At bat of the name, Greg Weissert, tip of the cap, got that job done in the 8th inning. Got their final 2 outs and left 2 runners stranded.
The Pirates shut down the Phillies in Pittsburgh.
Philadelphia Phillies get swept out of Pittsburgh, lost 5 of 6 on the road trip and 10 of their last 13 games. Does this sound familiar? Because this looks exactly like what the Phillies went through last year, except this year's start wasn't as hot as last year's start. You're talking about a team now just 9 games over 500, and this is a team that's supposed to have World Series aspirations. Hey, left field, Max Kepler, he ain't it, Dave Dombrowski. Bryson Stott's a leadoff hitter, Rob Thompson, he ain't it either. You're talking about a sub-300 on-base percentage as a leadoff hitter in your lineup. That's not going to get it done. His approach to the plate is great. His production is non-existent. If those two things aren't matching up, guess what? You don't have a leadoff hitter. Phillies are going to return home for a 3-game series against the Cubs, and I wish I could look forward to that. But what good was that home cooking the last time they were home when they got swept by the Milwaukee Brewers? Phillies have a lot to correct, especially when it comes to the offense.
And the Padres stopped the Brewers' win streak at 7.
Just an unbelievably terrible offensive weekend for the Milwaukee Brewers. At AmFam Field this weekend, Hitters Park, Chuck Freeman instant reaction locked on Brewers. Brewers were shut out Friday and Sunday. 4 hits on the board today. They teased us a couple of times. Thank God that Caleb Durbin rescued the team on Saturday night with that game-winning walk-off home run. But, man, he had a chance to gain on the Cubs today. We got beat by Detroit. the pitching was fantastic. Yeah, I know McGill blew the save, but man, we leaned so much on that pitching staff. Didn't like Robbie Z coming in that game in the 7th inning facing the right-hander Machado, but that's not where the game was lost. Were the Brewers ever going to really score any runs today anyway? All right, we'll talk about all this coming up tonight on the next edition of Locked On Brewers. Please subscribe.
The Indiana Pacers fall to the Oklahoma City Thunder in Game 2 of the NBA Finals. 123-107 is the final score. And we have Tony East of Locked On Pacers here to talk about the loss for Indiana. Tony, the Thunder were pretty steady with their lead throughout this game. Tyrese Halliburton really struggled for most of it until late when he was able to get a couple more points on the board. What was the big difference for you here from Game 1 to Game 2 that Indiana couldn't get the job done this time around?
Yeah, they've had trouble getting in the paint the whole series, only 34 points in the paint in both of these games, which is an alarming problem for them, for a team that loves to get in the paint and create shots. In Game 1, they overcame that with slightly better defense and way better shooting. Today, they couldn't find either of those things. Their offensive rhythm was way off, right? Tyrese Halliburton, like you said, never got going, and that always affects everybody, not just him, because he's such a good passer as well. You know, you saw at the start of the second half when Halliburton got moving a little bit, that helped Miles Turner a lot, for example. So they never got into that kind of flow. When they can't get in the paint, their consistency just isn't there. So that late first quarter and all the second quarter, every time the Thunder would get a stop, they would push and they would score with these. So not only was the Pacers' offensive struggle just that, an offensive struggle, it led to defensive issues too, because the Thunder just punished them in transition.
And we know that the Thunder defense, Tony, is extremely swarming, can force turnovers whenever they want to. And when they force teams to not get in the paint, it becomes a problem. But for Tyrese in particular here, how do you evaluate his first 2 games in the finals? And I saw that you actually put an update that he wasn't moving around as well as you'd like to see post-game. Can you give maybe an update on that as well?
Yeah, we saw him moving in and out of the post-game media room as he headed to the, the desk and back, and not moving great. Certainly a slight limp. You never know what that is post in these kind of settings. They have 2 days off before the next game, and he would never admit if he was hurt, even in this setting. But yeah, certainly not 100% walking. All right, we'll see what that leads to tomorrow, or the injury report that comes out on Tuesday. But he played the whole game. He led the team in shots, which is hilarious to say because throughout the game, it certainly did not feel that way, right? He was 7 shots at halftime, like for a star player. And I get that the way Tyrese Halliburton is, he's probably the best player in the league who can be like boxed out of a game by a great defensive player like Lou Dort. He does end up with 17 points, but a lot of it came late on some floaters after they were down 20, down 15, whatever, well out of the game. He always talks about aggressiveness for him, not necessarily being his point total. And I agree with this after covering him for seasons, but more about him getting into the paint, his getting 2 feet in the paint and being able to spray out from there, gets the whole offense moving. And so obviously 17 points is, it's more than he had in Game 1, but not enough, right? They need him to get going, but his assist only being at 6 and team's ball movement in general being a little bit poor, as I mentioned earlier, I think that is really where him being cut off is hurting. So of course he needs to be better. You're seeing an undeniable star on the other team in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander playing awesome ball, but Halliburton needs to find a way to be a little bit better. And the Pacers too need to get him going, because when they got him going on the move in that fourth quarter, he got rolling a little bit, obviously way too little too late.
And speaking of Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 38 points in Game 1, followed up by 34 points in Game 2. What are the adjustments the Pacers need to make to be able to slow down Shai and make other players make some more shots? Divine intervention,
anything of the sort, right? Like he's been averaging 30 a game for forever. He gets 21 shots with ease, 12 free throws, because he's just a snake, like a slithery little snake. You can't stay in front of him. He can score from anywhere. He's going to draw fouls, and 34 points in this one, plus 5 in his minutes. Like they're not getting crushed when he's out there necessarily, but they just got to do a lot better of at least making it as hard as possible for him by either, of course, defending him as well as they can, which of course they're trying to do, but also really attacking him on the other end of the floor, wear him out over the course of a game, because no singular play or plan can stop him. If they could, everybody would just be doing that thing, especially when they have other good enough talented scorers. Jalen Williams was better in this game than he was in Game 1, for example. I know the score doesn't really show that, but getting to the line for 9 free throws was really helpful for him. Chet Holmgren was obviously much better, right? They have other good players, so it's not easy to just cut him off and cut the water off and figure it out that way. So yes, they can be better individually on him and swarming him in the paint, but it's a wear down effect that they've got to figure out for a full game.
Game 3 shifts to Indiana for the next 2. Obviously, Tony, what do you want to see from this Pacers team? What other players need to step up a little bit more in your eyes?
Yeah, getting in the paint is an everybody thing. Obviously, Halliburton's the face of it, given the way the Pacers play, given the way they move the ball. They need to get him going. Of course, we already talked about that, but really everybody, right? Their assist number being, 27, that's not typical for them. They like to be a little bit higher than that. Aaron Nesmith was off in this one. Siakam only 3 for 11. Of course, he drew a bunch of fouls, but he's got to be a little bit better. I think just in general, their offensive process, they always call themselves an ecosystem, right? You could point at individuals and say, make more shots, shoot better. Like, duh, that's the point of the sport. But it's very connected that one player's strong performance generally leads to better play from other guys. So I think you can see that coming through for everybody. If one or two guys are better there, it tilts the defense. But generally, I would say the bench. The bench has not been very good in this series. The minutes they've had with more bench players on the floor than not have been not very good. That's been a bread and butter thing for the Pacers, is using their depth in the playoffs. The Thunder also have a good bench. The Pacers need to find a way to have those minutes go better, because that late first quarter, second quarter stretch really did them in, and it was a lot of bench in that time.
Stay up to date all year on the Indiana Pacers by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Pacers on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the Oilers are locked and loaded for Game 3. The Edmonton Oilers are locked in a Stanley Cup Finals rematch with the Florida Panthers. Locked On Oilers host Nick Zararis explains how Edmonton changes the ending for 2025.
I think everyone was aware this was going to be a back and forth series. These are two very evenly matched teams that largely mirrored Game 1 in Game 2, and you saw almost the full range of potential outcomes in a given game for these two teams. You saw the Oilers get out to a lead, you saw the Panthers take the lead back, and then you saw the Oilers tie the game to force overtime. Then you think about how Game 1 went down, where the Oilers were able to work their way back from 3-1 down to force overtime there and win. And look, we all know riding the overtime lightning, eventually the bill comes due. The Oilers already have won a number of games in overtime. That was their first loss in overtime so far these playoffs. And actually, it's very reminiscent of the first time the Panthers went to the Stanley Cup Final against the Vegas Golden Knights 2 years ago now, where they had won the first 3 overtimes games they had played on their way to the Stanley Cup Final, beating, I believe it was the Bruins twice in their first round series to mount that comeback against what had been the best regular season team of all time in this present format, that Bruins team that the Panthers won against in 2023. So opening that up, taking it for what it is, and look, and I know I've done the Mike Francesa and look transition a few times already, and we're only a handful of minutes into today's show, but you have to temper the energy, because as soon as you start to feel good about your game this time of year, that's when your opponent's going to adjust. And look, to Florida's credit, they played a better game than they did in game number 1. Game number 1, the Oilers were firmly in control from the start of the third period through the eventual Draisaitl overtime winner. And they had their chances in game 2, which is why you probably have a bit of a bitter taste in your mouth. You're a little bit frustrated, but it's important to keep these feelings in the proper context. This is not a regular season game against the Flames in February. This is the Stanley Cup Final against the team that has gone to 3 straight Stanley Cup Finals and is arguably the deepest they've been on those 3 runs this year. This is a really gifted group, and they will take small chances. And it's funny, I was watching the game on Friday night with a couple of my friends, and as soon as I saw Bouchard get caught in between on the breakaway that eventually became the Marchand game winner, I said, oh no. And they all didn't really react, clock it. But after Marchand had eventually scored, my one friend tapped me and he goes, how'd you know? And I said, I didn't know he was going to score, but I knew he was going to get a good look because Bouchard got caught on an in-between hop, like a shortstop on a ground ball that takes an extra skip when he's all square, ready to get in front of it. And he pinched a little too early and got himself caught a little flat-footed, and he wasn't going to be able to turn around and skate as fast as he needed to, and he opted to back skate, and ultimately Marchand gets around him. Skinner lets it in, and look, I really try not to get on the character and the intent of teams, because we all know these are hockey players. They all play up to and sometimes over that line of what's ethical and what's okay. But The Sam Bennett just falling on every goalie in plain sight act is one of the most tiresome things I can recall. It's not quite Sean Avery screening Marty Brodeur by looking at him and yelling at him, but it's in the same ballpark of petulant, I won't say arrogance, but immaturity. And look, I understand the rules are what they are. I understand the Panthers are held to a funky officiating standard because they take so many plays. They make so many plays that could be considered penalties. The referees won't call everything they do. And that creates this environment where they're going to keep pushing the envelope until they do get called for something. And Stuart Skinner has largely been okay in this series so far. You hope he's close to 100%. No one is 100% this time of year. So I think hoping for that is maybe a little bit optimistic or maybe even misguided. But you had a chance in game one. And if your B- effort that I think you would say the Oilers played, you give up a shorty to Marchand, you didn't play great there. Your power play missed some opportunities. You needed a crazy individual effort from Corey Perry just to get to overtime. And you reset the ledger. You play a whole 20 minutes to get to that second overtime, and you go reasonably deep into that second overtime before a broken play eventually ends the game. And look, that's how hockey goes. I said it in my hit for game night on Friday that I sent to the guys. A double overtime game is ending on the ugliest goal imaginable. And a squeaker that barely gets through Skinner on a Marchand breakaway meets the definition of a stupid goal.
Heartbreak in Chicago, where WNBA legend Courtney Vandersloot will miss the rest of the season with a torn ACL. The Sky were hoping her return would steady the ship, but now their all-time assist queen will be leading from the sideline. It's a tough break for one of the game's greats and a major test of how fast Haley Van Lith and company can grow up. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we are here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up, how will the Panthers respond in Florida to the Oilers? So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.